UFO sightings were easily dismissed until the Nimitz encounter, which was so hard to dismiss that the government was forced to admit the existence of UFOs. In fact, the Pentagon set up an entire task force to investigate UFOs, and it all started with this encounter. So, what was so special about it? Why did it become the most cited UFO encounter in history? More importantly, why didn't the government try to hide it? Let's find out. It all started on November 14, 2004. Commander David Fravor of the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group thought it was going to be just another day of work when he took off to investigate radar signals indicating a potential target off the coast of Southern California. But it was no ordinary radar signal, and Captain Fravor was about to find this out. For 2 weeks, another carrier in Fravor's strike group had been tracking an unusual aircraft that kept popping in and out of sight. Fravor had heard about this, but didn't really get a chance to see the aircraft himself. But even 2 weeks of buildup did not prepare him for what he saw when he closed in on the source of the signal. What he saw was an aircraft that did not look like any human aircraft. It wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a passenger plane, and it was definitely not a jet. What Fravor saw was a floating object that had no wings and rotors. Fravor tried to get close to the oval-shaped object, but quickly realized why that was a bad idea. The flying object dropped from a height of 80,000 feet all the way down to 20,000 feet within seconds. It moved faster than gravity could pull it. Fravor had spiraled down to get close to the object, but it went up thousands of feet within seconds. These sudden jumps took Fravor by surprise, but he tried to stay calm and focused on gathering data. But there wasn't much he could gather with his bare eyes. The best he could do was guess the object's height, which he thought was about 40 feet across. Before he could notice anything else, the oval aircraft disappeared. Fravor told others on the Nimitz about the strange aircraft and its terrifying speed. As he described what he saw, even he could see why no one would believe him. And if no one believed him, he would be yet another guy with a UFO story. But what happened next changed everything. Instead of dismissing Fravor's account, others on the carrier decided to take it seriously, not because they thought they had seen an alien aircraft, but because what he had described sounded like a security threat. As unbelievable as Fravor's story was, it was too risky to dismiss it without further investigation. So the next time Fravor went up in the air, he had company. Another jet, piloted by Alex Dietrich, tagged along. Just like Fravor, Dietrich also had a weapons systems officer in her back seat, so a total of 4 people saw what happened next.
So, as we're looking at this, her backseater says, "Hey, Skipper, do you?" And about that got out, I said, "Dude, do you see that thing down there?" And we saw this little white tic-tac looking object, and it's just kind of moving above the whitewater area.
What fascinated Dietrich was how the aircraft moved like an object instead of a plane. In the same interview, she described its pattern of movement with a relatable analogy.
Do you ever drop your phone and it sort of bounces off the countertop and then bounces off something else, and it's sort of like no predictable movement, no predictable trajectory?
Yeah.
Yes, it was just
like a ping pong ball.
no acceleration.
Very, very random.
Acceleration.
And that was the extent of what you could get from this story, if it wasn't for the hero of the Nimitz encounter, Chad Underwood. This guy was on another crew that noticed the same flying object after it zoomed out of Fravor and Dietrich's reach. And he's the hero because, unlike Fravor, he had an advanced infrared camera called forward-looking infrared, or FLIR. Without this FLIR, we would have no footage of the UFO. Because this was 2004, no one had a good enough camera to capture a 40-foot object in the sky from miles away. But since Underwood had the FLIR, he managed to record the flying object. But before I show you Underwood's FLIR footage, I want you to see what a regular airplane looks like on a thermal camera. Notice how clear the shape of the plane is. And also those plumes of smoke coming off the engines. That is what a regular aircraft looks like on FLIR. You can see smoke or heat coming off of its engine, and its shape is recognizable. Now, look at what Chad Underwood captured during the Nimitz encounter. Look at the shape. It is clearly no helicopter or plane. And it's not a drone, because there's no smoke or heat coming off of it. And that's what puzzled Fravor and company. The object looked like a tic-tac that was floating in the air with no engine or rotors. Plus, it was at a height that not even modern drones could scale, and this was 20 years ago. But that was not the craziest thing about this encounter. It was what Underwood's camera captured next that changed everything. Initially, the tic-tac was just frozen in the air. You could mistake it for a smudge on the screen. But then, Underwood zoomed in to get a better view, and the object began to move. It was as if the object noticed that it was being noticed, and it vanished, never to appear again. Fravor wasn't seeing any of this on the FLIR. He was witnessing the object with his naked eyes. When he looked at the video later, he noticed something terrifying that many had not noticed. And it was not on the thermal camera screen, it was on the radar screen. David Fravor noticed that, for the entire time that the object was visible, the radar screen remained frozen.
And the right one never got copied because they usually don't use that because it was just showing the radar being jammed. And the folks in Intel, the petty officers in Intel, they don't understand what that means. To us, it meant a lot because it showed a capability that was just literally crushing the APG-73, which is the old mechanically scanned radar that we had in the Super.
As Fravor explained, they had literally seen the object jam their radars. But luckily, it could not jam the FLIR camera. So, as the jets went back to the carrier, the Nimitz group knew that what they had on their hands was a video file that would change the world. But their excitement vanished as the footage was taken away without an explanation. It was clear that the FLIR footage was going to be buried, or in official terms, classified. Fravor, Dietrich, and Underwood were told to simply go about their lives, as if they had not just seen technology far more advanced than anything humans were capable of. Pretty much everyone who witnessed the floating tic-tac was convinced that it was an alien aircraft. And what happened next confirmed their suspicions. Shortly after the FLIR footage was reviewed on a big screen, unknown individuals showed up on the aircraft carrier. Remember, the USS Nimitz was in the Pacific Ocean when this happened, so whatever the video had captured was important enough for these unknown men. After taking copies of the FLIR recording and the radar data, the mystery men instructed Navy personnel to erase all recordings related to the encounter. Then they took off, leaving behind only a hushed memory of the incident. Out of sheer patriotism or fear, the Nimitz group decided to do as they were told and remained quiet. They secretly hoped that one day the video would be declassified. However, important information is usually declassified in response to Freedom of Information Act requests, and if no one on the outside knew that the Pentagon had a UFO video, no one would file the request needed to get it declassified. It really seemed like Fravor and company would have to take this story to their graves, or at least to their retirements. Commander David Fravor retired in 2006, roughly 2 years after witnessing the UFO. Still, he did not break his silence. He didn't talk about the floating object or the mystery men who showed up to take the recordings. This is important because it speaks to his character. Fravor could have broken the story and waited for the video to be declassified. It would have made him a superstar in the conspiracy circles. But he went about his life without mentioning anything related to the Nimitz encounter. Then, a decade later, the videos got leaked. And I say videos because apparently there was more than one. The 2004 encounter was just the first of multiple cases in which US fighter pilots saw UFOs hovering in the air and defying the laws of physics. And in almost every case, a group of unknown individuals showed up to take the recordings. All of this was exposed in 2017 when the New York Times published a story that finally disclosed who the mystery men were. According to the Times piece, the Pentagon had an entire program dedicated to UFOs, or as the Pentagon would put it, UAPs. UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena and covers not just physical objects, but also unexplained occurrences like glowing lights and radar jams. The UAP task force had been investigating UFO sightings and collecting video evidence of UAP encounters. And the Times got its hands on 2 videos of flying objects taken from Navy jets. The first was the FLIR video that you watched earlier. The second was one titled Gimbal. And Gimbal had some interesting commentary from the pilots observing the fast-moving object.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. The whole thing, dude.
The speed of the flying object was obvious from how fast it was zipping across the clouds in the background. But while the pilots were busy admiring how effortlessly the thing was gliding against the wind, it made an unexpected move.
That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's look at that thing. It's rotating.
When these videos were published, interest in UFOs spiked once again, with people looking towards the Pentagon for a comment, but all it offered was silence. Obviously, the government wasn't happy about the story, and it didn't jump to confirm whether the clips were genuine. And if the Pentagon did not confirm the video's authenticity, Fravor would not be free to talk about it. Fortunately, the Defense Department was bombarded by Freedom of Information Act requests and could not keep sitting on videos that had already been leaked. So, the Pentagon confirmed the video's authenticity, which meant that Fravor could freely talk about his experience. Within days, Fravor was all over the media, giving interviews to the Washington Post and ABC News, among other media outlets. His most informative interview was the 60-minute sit-down featuring Alex Dietrich, the other pilot. While Dietrich and Fravor didn't jump to conclusions, they did offer an eye-opening account of the encounter, things that weren't obvious from the FLIR footage.
Tic-tac still pointing north-south, it goes and just turns abruptly and starts mirroring me. So as I'm coming down, it starts coming up.
So it's mimicking your moves.
Yeah, it was aware we were there. You want to see how close I can get. So I go like this, and it's climbing still. And when it gets right in front of me, it just disappears. Disappears. Like gone.
And you saw no visible propulsion,
Right.
no wings or anything to
No.
make it fly in our atmosphere?
No, actually, when it turned and started coming up, it was kind of like, okay. Because we have nothing that goes that fast and just starts climbing at will.
Seconds later, the object was picked up by a radar 60 miles away from Fravor's plane.
So you've got the infrared image
Right.
Yes.
and your eyesight
Yes.
and the Princeton
The radar.
all saying there is something out there.
Yes.
Even though Fravor never claimed the UAP was an extraterrestrial aircraft, he became the poster child of the alien narrative. Despite the Pentagon's confirmation of the Nimitz encounter, many critics pounced on Fravor. Some called him misguided, while others accused him of exaggerating what he saw. Fravor, who had spent a long time wishing he could tell his story, started wondering if going public was worth it. But time was Fravor's best friend. The UFO cat was out of the Pentagon bag, and public attitude towards such phenomena was definitely shifting. And for some reason, the government did not seem to get in the way. In fact, it was actively spreading the story. In April 2020, the FLIR and gimbal videos were re-released, this time officially by the Pentagon. Now, every publication, podcast, and content creator could use the videos without permission from the New York Times. So obviously, the story blew up and went from traditional media to new media. Fravor made appearances on multiple shows and podcasts, including The Joe Rogan Experience. Fravor recapped the Nimitz encounter in great detail. It was perhaps his most detailed account of what happened on that fateful day.
We look down, and the Wizzo in the other airplane comes up and says, "Hey, Skipper, do you?" And that's about what he gets out of his mouth. And I'm kind of looking at the same thing. I go, "Dude, do you see that? What is that thing?" And what we see is this white tic-tac looking object just above the surface of the water, pointing north-south, and it's going north-south, east-west. It's just radically moving forward, back, left, right at will. And it's moving around the disturbance, the white water that we see.
How big is this thing?
So, over time, it's about 40 feet long. And the way I estimate that is, I got a lot of time fighting other airplanes, so it's about the size of a Hornet fuselage. So that's why I say 40 feet.
His sit-down with Rogan was far from his only appearance. He went on more than 20 podcasts, telling the same story and emphasizing how the object was unlike any human aircraft he had seen. Over time, Fravor got a little bold about the origins of the object he had seen. Initially, he maintained that the aircraft wasn't proof of alien life, but after a few interviews, he started saying what he truly believed, that the object was not from this world. While Fravor found the courage to put forward his theory, the government wasn't ready to go that far just yet. The Pentagon's stance was that though the object captured in the videos was not yet identified, it wasn't necessarily alien in nature. Critics leaned on that last bit to once again dismiss and diminish Fravor and his claims respectively. But time would be Fravor's friend once again. 2 years later, the House Intelligence Subcommittee held a congressional hearing on UFOs. It was the first public hearing on the subject in over 50 years. And its seriousness was obvious from its roster of high-profile attendees, like the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Bray, and the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, Ronald Moultrie. This is significant because the committee was looking at UFO reports not out of scientific curiosity, but because of national security concerns. UFOs were being introduced to the public as a potential threat, which is why most people who spoke during the hearing were connected to the Department of Defense. Members of the House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counterproliferation went over military reports and accounts of unexplained aerial phenomena.
Since the early 2000s, we have seen an increasing number of unauthorized and/or unidentified aircraft or objects in military-controlled training areas and training ranges and other designated airspace. If UAP do indeed represent a potential threat to our security, then the capabilities, systems, processes, and sources we use to observe, record, study, or analyze these phenomena need to be classified at appropriate levels. We do not want potential adversaries to know exactly what we're able to see or understand, or how we come to the conclusions we make. Therefore, public disclosures must be carefully considered on a case-by-case basis.
That stance explains why the Pentagon will always know more about UFOs than you and I. So if we have access to Fravor's story, just imagine the stories that the Pentagon hasn't allowed to come out. That's exactly what Ronald Moultrie addressed when it was his turn to speak.
With regard to the importance of transparency, the department is fully committed to the principle of openness and accountability to the American people. However, we are also mindful of our obligation to protect sensitive sources and methods. Our goal is to strike that delicate balance, one that enables us to maintain the public's trust while preserving those capabilities that are vital to the support of our service personnel.
Despite this commitment, the hearing did not lead to a satisfying explanation of the unidentified phenomena. While there was no definitive conclusion regarding alien life or extraterrestrial threats, the hearing still managed to highlight how little we know about UFOs. Many skeptics softened their stance after the hearing. If the Department of Defense had an entire UFO task force, why would anyone dismiss the possibility of their existence? Still, some people remained skeptical until the next hearing, which changed everything. And I truly mean everything. Today, UFO denial is the fringe view, while UFO acceptance is mainstream. So what happened at the second hearing that caused such a drastic shift in public opinion? For starters, David Fravor himself was invited as a witness. And while Fravor said what he had always said, the witness who stole the show was David Gersh. I've talked about Gersh in my Area 51 video, which I highly recommend. But basically, he's an ex-Air Force officer and more recently a former intelligence officer who was on the UFO task force. And what he said about aliens and government knowledge of aliens went far beyond anything David Fravor had said.
Do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
That's just a small chunk of the wild statements made by Gersh under oath. So definitely check out my Area 51 video for more of that. But right now, what's important is that this hearing, alongside the Pentagon's UFO report, changed the public's view regarding unidentified aerial phenomena. Fravor was vindicated. But the questions he asked then remain as unanswered today as they were on day one. Questions like, what was that flying object? Where did it come from? What kind of technology did it use? We might not have definitive answers, but we do have some plausible theories. The alien theory is the most straightforward one, though it's a little too out there for many to digest. According to this theory, the UFOs are alien aircraft that keep an eye on humans. Most iterations of this theory suggest that our nuclear capabilities have put us on the extraterrestrial radar, and that UFOs are reconnaissance drones that gather data and send it back to outer space. This theory is more story than science. Things that go in its favor revolve around the flight capabilities of these objects. They often accelerate at speeds that should not be possible. The Nimitz UFO moved at such a high speed that it should have caught fire. Meteors catch fire at a much lower speed. But critics say that none of this proves the existence of aliens. Their stance is that just because we can't explain something doesn't mean that it is the aliens. To their credit, we have not found signs of life anywhere else in the universe, not even single-celled organisms. So to take the first unexplained object as a surefire indicator of an advanced civilization elsewhere in the universe is a bit of a stretch. So what else could it be? The advanced human hypothesis suggests that what we think are aliens are just humans who left the planet long ago. This would explain why an advanced civilization from outer space would be interested in what sentient apes on Earth are up to. Most versions of this theory suggest that these advanced humans are benevolent helpers who have shaped our technological process. From the steam engine to silicon chips, every step of our process was inspired by these humans from outer space. Again, it's a compelling story, but what's the evidence? Well, for starters, we have made a lot of stuff by simply observing things that already exist. I mean, early planes were literally modeled after birds. We call it biomimicry, and it's what helped us build everything from sonar to radar and Velcro to the bullet train. So where did we get the idea to build computers? Many believe that advanced humans from outer space helped us by leaving behind technology that we reverse engineered. And proponents of this theory suggest that our recent interest in colonizing Mars might have triggered the uptick in UFO visits. Maybe the advanced humans are trying to help us build a new form of aviation technology. Again, a great theory, but you can see its criticism coming from a mile away. There is no physical evidence that proves that humans ever left Earth to settle elsewhere. What we have is a collection of eyewitness testimonies and clips that show something moving very quickly across the screen. Jumping from that to a story about humans who left long ago sending drones to help us leave Earth is speculation at best. Then we have the most mundane theory, a collection of glitches. According to this theory, all UFO encounters captured on military plane radars and cameras are glitches. Plumes of smoke, light interacting with clouds, and even birds can create visuals that look strange on camera. Of course, this might sound like a grounded explanation, but there's no way the Pentagon set up an entire task force to investigate birds and jet engine smoke. The main criticism of this theory is that it isn't organic. It wasn't created from observation or as a result of an investigation. It was crafted as an acceptable alternative to the alien theory. So it's like a blanket that we're pulling over our heads because we don't want to face the fact that what we've captured on camera are objects that science can't explain. None of these theories are as terrifying and practical as the final one, the false flag theory. According to this theory, the government is actively pushing the alien narrative to unify humanity under a global government. The 60-minute segment with David Fravor and Alex Dietrich opened with these words.
The Pentagon set up the UAP task force to collect and analyze evidence gathered by service members who are now being encouraged to report these strange encounters.
So, the Pentagon encouraged pilots to talk about their UFO encounters. Then, the House committees held multiple hearings regarding unidentified aerial phenomena. Fravor himself never said anything negative about the government, and even changed his story to specifically mention that no one took the tapes or asked him to stay silent. If Fravor, Dietrich, and the rest have the government's seal of approval, then it really looks like the higher-ups want to keep UFOs in the public consciousness. After all, none of the recent UFO whistleblowers have been mistreated, maligned, or discredited like old-school whistleblowers from the 80s. Some have kept their security clearance while talking about aliens and non-human biologics. So the government is clearly not interested in suppressing the UFO narrative. And that leads us to two possibilities that are equally terrifying. The first is that the one-world government hypothesis is true, and that the higher-ups will fake an alien invasion to force all the countries to unite under a single government. What could possibly be more terrifying than that? Well, the other possibility. That aliens are real and on their way here, and whatever the government is doing is simply trying to catch us up to speed. These hearings, interviews, and maybe even this video are all a giant psyop to get you mentally ready for what's about to come. If that's true, then all I can say is good luck.